Good morning, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good day, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, let's get into the news this Monday morning. Pentagon announces fresh round of munitions for Ukraine. Ukrainian fighting forces will receive a fresh round of heavy munitions from the United States to assist in the country's fight against Russian invaders. The Pentagon announced on Friday. The Department of Defense said in release that it was sending, quote, critical air defense capabilities to the country as well as armored infantry vehicles, Javelin anti-tank missiles, artillery, ammunition and conventional and long-range rockets. Ukraine well received 2,000 anti-armor rockets, quotes claim more anti-personnel munitions and nearly 200 heavy machine guns. The release noted the new material as part of a more than $2 billion defense package being sent to Ukraine this month. DNC approves Biden's request to remove Iowa as the first voting state. The Democratic National Committee on Saturday approved Joe Biden's shake-up of the party's 2024 primary calendar, giving black voters a greater say in the nominating process and carving an easier path for Biden's expected re-election bid. The party's vote on Saturday replaces the famed Iowa caucuses as the first in the nation with South Carolina, a state with significantly more black voters and one that saved Biden's 2020 presidential campaign. It would be followed by New Hampshire and Nevada 1 week later. And then by primaries in Georgia and Michigan. The promotion of South Carolina and Georgia reflects a demographic balancing decades in the making for the Democratic Party at the expense of two largely, quote, white states that rejected Biden in 2020. It also underscores the growing power of the racially diverse coalition that helped bring Biden to office. The move faced opposition from leaders in Iowa and New Hampshire who were being pushed down the nominating calendar and vowed to defy the new schedule and hold elections on their own schedule. Any change to those calendars would require support from Republicans who control the government and oppose the move. Texas border sheriff wants smugglers to get 5 years per illegal immigrants smuggled into the states. The number of human smugglers arrested by deputies in Kinney County, Texas has more than quadrupled in the past 2 years, and the sheriff wants the penalties to increase. Kinney County Sheriff Bradco and his deputies arrested 741 smugglers transporting illegal immigrants from the border in 2022. Up from 169 in 2020. Coasts that his deputies are arresting people who are flying down from Ohio or Washington, renting a car at the airport and then picking up illegal immigrants at the U.S.-Mexico border to transport them to San Antonio. Smugglers from Oklahoma, Louisiana and Florida are also prevalent in the area, he said. The sheriff said he's also seeing repeat offenders, those who have been charged with human smuggling, but no jail spaces available, usually for females and juveniles. So the charges are filed at large, leaving the suspects to continue to smuggle. Plans to defend Sheriff Day in Texas Capitol on February 22 to get lawmakers on board with stiffer smuggling penalties. He says he wants smugglers to get a mandatory minimum jail sentence of 5 years per illegal immigrant in the vehicle. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is also calling for a 5-year minimum sentence, quote, I will be seeking a mandatory of at least 5 years in prison for anyone caught committing this crime, Abbott wrote on Twitter on December 11. Last year, quotes, I'm getting tired of Texas residents smuggling people into our country illegally. Currently, smuggling of humans is a third-degree felony offense punishable by up to 2 years in prison and a fine of $2,000 per person being smuggled. In reality, cartels recruit smugglers through social media websites and messaging apps, promising thousands of dollars for transporting illegal aliens. The drivers tend to be a mix of U.S. citizens and illegal aliens themselves. Multiple states to consider bills to shut down immigration detention centers. Multiple states are set to consider legislation that would shut down immigrant detention facilities. The beginning of the 2023 state legislative sessions, Colorado, New Mexico and New York are all set to consider bills that would ban private immigrant detention facilities. The three bills, which are nearly identical to one another, would require local governments that currently have detention contracts who terminate them by January 1, 2024. The Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR, explains that the legislation would prevent state agencies and local governments from, quote, entering into detention contracts relating to a privately owned, managed or operated immigration detention facility or selling property for the purpose of establishing a privately owned, managed or operated immigration detention facility. FAIR also notes that most of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention facilities operate under a contractual agreements that include both local governments and private companies. Other states have already passed similar laws in recent years, though some have met legal trouble. California, for example, passed the first of these bans in 2019, though it was challenged in court before being ruled unconstitutional. Both Illinois and New Jersey passed similar laws in 2021, and though the Illinois ban was upheld by the Seventh Circuit, the New Jersey law was never challenged. House bill rescinding $71 billion for 80,000. The IRS agents stalled in Senate for nearly 4 weeks without a vote. The House passed bill rescinding $71.5 billion for the hiring of up to 87,000 IRS agents has languished in the Democrat-led Senate for nearly 4 weeks without a vote. The funding was part of the $740 billion Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, that Democrats passed last year. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy pledged to schedule a vote to eliminate the funding as his first order of business in the new Republican-led House. The GOP bill passed along party lines on January 9. Republicans have argued the funding could be used to target Americans earning less than $400,000 per year with additional audits. In response to the criticism, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen wrote to the IRS, instructed the agency not to use additional resources to target individuals or families in that category. Quote, "Instead, new funding will crack down on tax evaders among the wealthy, and large corporations invest in technology upgrades that help taxpayers and hire more customer support staff to prevent backlogs," she said in August, ahead of the Inflation Reduction Act's passage on a party line vote using budget reconciliation. Democrats defended the roughly $70 billion expenditure for the IRS as a revenue enhancement measure that would help pay for the legislation. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has criticized the GOP bill, signaling that it would not get a vote anytime soon in the Democrat-controlled chamber. Quote, "It is well known that too many wealthy individuals and large corporations through gaping loopholes do not pay their fair share of taxes, while average Americans often pay a much higher percent," the New York Democrat said after the bill passed in the House. Quote, "The 1,000s of increased IRS personnel are aimed at closing those loopholes and forcing the wealthy and well-connected to finally pay their fair share. It is incredible that the first move House Republicans make this Congress is to cut these agents and allow large corporations and wealthy individuals to continue to avoid paying their fair share of taxes." Schumer compared the bill's passage to the 2017 tax reform law enacted under former President Donald Trump and a GOP-led Congress. Quote, "Just as they failed in 2017, where Republicans cut taxes on the rich and tried to scare the middle class. This won't work either." He said the GOP tax reform income cut taxes across the board and lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. The Inflation Reduction Act included a 15% minimum corporate tax rate. And then, some significant news, several months back, you had Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice. Not a word from media, no preaching or pontificating. And you can look at these articles. AP newsman sentenced for ending woman's life during political argument. December 28, 2021. This is a man who ended this woman's life. I don't want to get into the details, while she was holding her 2-year-old son over an argument about the 2016. Okay. And he was voting for Clinton. You don't hear these stories. Everything is sensationalized. Press Telegram. Here's the article. Also injured her husband. An argument over Hillary Clinton in 2016. Sentenced to 35 years in prison. He ended the woman's life because he was, quote, teased for saying he voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Okay, so you got 35 years to life in prison? Press Telegram article. There are numerous articles on this. You don't hear anything about this, do you? Yeah. You don't hear anything because it completely goes against the mainstream narrative that it's the bad Trump supporters. And they're sowing such discord and chaos and mayhem. You can draw a T-chart. Things Biden said, things Trump said, things Biden said out way far worse, far more offensive, but you have a public relations machine. Same thing with chaos, mayhem, criminal activity, violence. The left are conservatives, there's no comparison. You have a couple $2 billion, over $2 to $3 to $4 billion in property damage, actually insured $1 to $2 billion, and then uninsured. This in a whole other story. That summer 2 years ago now I support why people were peacefully demonstrating. I support the cause why people are peacefully demonstrating the people who did not demonstrate following the law. Were guests what on the left? And you saw that in Portland, you saw that in a whole bunch of places. And nothing from mainstream everything's fine. Here you have Marjorie Taylor Greene. Experiencing this New York maid admits threatening to harm Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene. He pleaded guilty. He was also indicted. Okay. He was indicted last April on 3x3 counts of transmitting interstate threatening communications after he left 7 medicine messages to Miss for Mrs. Greene, Republican of Georgia. In one of the messages, OK identified himself, which investigators traced his phone. He said, Mrs. Greene, he was going to have to have to take your life into his own hands. OK. According to the Federal Bureau of Investigation agent's affidavit, and he says, I'm gonna hurt you physically, I'm gonna. So these are Democrats, left-leaning people going after Republicans. And again, it's bad when conservatives do that to Democrats. But you have to, if you just draw a T-chart and you just look at all the instances, you can say, oh, this is federal agency says that all the violence that's coming from Huawei. They're lumping. They're lumping just maniacs who do things for because they've lost their minds. Without really any political motive. There's no political motive there, but they just go ahead and in a lump, well, that he was influenced by the rhetoric. They have no evidence that anyone was influenced by a certain type of political rhetoric. But if you look, ladies and gentlemen, all of those studies done, they don't talk about the property damage 2 years ago or in the 19 lives lost according to Wikipedia or the 14,000 arrests. According to Wikipedia that summer, and I agree with why peaceful people were peacefully protesting. Okay. But here you have Axios New York maid admits to leaving Marjorie Taylor Greene voicemail threads. Okay. So he's been indicted, he faces a number of years in prison, and you have an issue where Marjorie Taylor Greene's life was at risk of that. That's why she arms herself. That's why I've armed myself. That's why you might arm yourself. Second Amendment is there. I had my own threatening messages or a person threatened my life. And I went to the police station, and years back, the policeman said, yeah, you know what? Second Amendment, arm yourself. He literally told me armed myself, so I did. And you have to have a pristine record to obtain firearms. So I mean, it's difficult to do actually. It's not that difficult if you have a pristine record, but it's not easy. It's not the way the left thinks it's easy. You have a situation where media doesn't care. Media, you have activists now, and for like 3-4 years in media since Trump, we do not have an objective a political media. You can look back at Wolf Blitzer, CNN 20 years ago, 22 years ago now, when it was Bush versus Gore, they didn't care. They didn't really care who you had, journalists and reporters in media, who didn't care if Gore won, or Bush won, who was just politics, was not part of pop culture. It wasn't part of Hollywood. You could watch the Academy Awards. You could watch Johnny Carson, Arsenio Hall years back, and you can enjoy yourself at night, and talk shows were in about politics. You didn't get into political discussions and Thanksgiving or New Year's, or you didn't, the wonderful, morally superior, apoplectic liberal in your life didn't ruin dinners, or get-togethers telling you how bad you are, as they're ignorant of Hunter and Joe and Hillary servers and all of these issues, and never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts that Democrats pushed for all of these problems. The fact that we're 90 seconds to midnight, record highs and inflation and invasion in Europe under Biden's watch, we can go on forever again, left, right, center. If you're Democrat, Republican, God bless you. Doesn't matter who you are. I'm not anti-tribalism. But I learned at a young age, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about money. These are 3 things you don't talk about in life. You don't sit with your friends and talk about money, or religion, or politics. It's not, there's no point to it, especially when you have a rebuttal for everything like I do. Or like you do. If you watch this channel, you'll definitely have a rebuttal for a lot of things. But it's become show passionate because media realizes, and Democrats media, I mean, FTX, they had $1 billion from Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX money, a failed Ponzi scheme crypto exchange. They have Twitter files showing massive corruption. First Amendment law was broken, and yes, they were broke, and I've read all the articles, the rebuttals, the viewpoints, the counterpoints, the arguments saying, well, that's just how things are done. Well, there's nothing wrong with the government getting involved. It was their trust and their safety and their protocol. That's the way that Twitter was run. Like, well, they needed a pretext to suspend and censor the New York Post and silence 250,000 conservatives on Twitter. Okay. So yeah, government agencies and government officials and Democratic representatives and senators were involved, Congress people were involved. Okay. That's why you had a fabricated consensus. Alright, thanks for being here folks, please receive a big hug from all of us, let me know